What better way to kick off the weekend than with six more sleepers to take in your fantasy basketball league this season? This is the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast, which is part of the Old Man Squad Sports Network, part of the Believe Network, and presented by FanDuel. I am your host, Noah Rubin. I feel like I forget to say that every single time, so hopefully you know by now. But if you're newer to the show, I'm Noah. Nice to meet you, and we will be talking about six different sleepers. Typically, this is a dynasty-focused show, but we're going to spend a couple of weeks at least emphasizing redraft leagues a little bit more than we typically do. As I'm going through my list and making my list of sleepers, it's a bunch of players that I feel pretty strongly about in dynasty leagues as well. Through this entire list of 18 players that we're going to go over the course of 3 episodes, aside from D'Angelo Russell, who we talked about last episode. The rest of these guys, outside of maybe one today, I feel like I value a lot of these players pretty highly in dynasty leagues. You know what? I'm just going to say, yeah, I value that guy higher too. We'll talk about him in a little bit, and I'll explain why I'm a little bit on the fence about saying that, but definitely holds a lot of value, though it might be only for a limited time. So we've got 6 players to talk about today. Just looking through it, we've got 3 guards, a forward, and 2 bigs. So a nice, I guess, diverse group of positions to be able to discuss. So the first player that we are going to talk about today is the Raptors' Immanuel Quickley, who last season only played in 33 games. Everyone remembers his breakout at the end of the 2023-2024 season when he was traded as part of the OG Anunoby trade that's also sent RJ Barrett to Toronto along with Immanuel Quickley, where Quickley immediately became a starter to start off 2024 and was really valuable in fantasy basketball over the final 3 months of the season, final 3.5 months, aside from when he missed a handful of games. But when he was on the floor, he was putting up huge numbers. And then this past season, because of all the injuries he dealt with, and then Toronto tanking by the end of the year, he was only playing every other game and had his minutes limited. So he played 27.8 minutes per game, which was lower than his previous 2 seasons, even when he was coming off the bench in New York. Still averaged 17.1 points, 3.5 rebounds, 5.8 assists, 2.6 3-pointers per game. So just to reiterate, the minutes were lower than it was the previous 2 seasons, but he averaged, even though it was limited sample size because only a handful of games, career high in points, career high in assists, career high in threes. Still didn't turn the ball over a ton, despite being up to almost 6 assists per game. And if you're watching this video, then you're able to see on the screen. But if not, then I will explain the stats courtesy of Data Baller, where he had the ball in his hands a ton this past season. It's just a high usage rate, the highest since his rookie year usage rate, though that was a very different role because he was playing less than 20 minutes per game. Spent a lot of time on the ball this past season in his limited sample size of games. So, or still, despite that, only 1.8 turnovers to 5.8 assists. Really strong ratio there. We're not expecting him to, I guess, jump up to like 8 or 9 assists per game, but hovering around 6 assists per game, maybe even up to like 6.5, just by seeing his minutes increase, just by being healthy. And obviously that is a factor here. Just hopefully he is healthy. He's healthy right now. Unless there's a random injury that I just haven't heard about. So he should be good. And then just obviously with any player, everything goes off the rails if they get hurt. But the production last season was still strong. Now Toronto has Brandon Ingram healthy. They added Colin Murray-Boyles. So what does that mean? They're going to be more competitive this year. I think that they have a more talented roster, even if it fits kind of clunky and we're not exactly sure how well this thing will work. This is a more competitive roster in a weaker Eastern Conference that will be competing for a postseason spot, whether that be a play-in spot or potentially even making it out of the play-in tournament. I don't see them as a top 6 team, but a team that can push for a playoff spot by making the play-in tournament. But the lack of spacing is alarming. Jakob Poeltl's obviously a non-shooter. Scotty Barnes is a more willing shooter, but he's not a great shooter. Same thing with RJ Barrett. Brandon Ingram, who I think, just spoiler alert, is going to be in our next set of sleepers in part 3 of this little series. Could be a more willing 3-point shooter, and that was kind of when he had his best fantasy seasons. But if he's willing to kind of be one of the primary shooters, still Immanuel Quickley will fill that role as well. So Quickley's either going to have the ball in his hands or be looking to space the floor. He's going to be very important to this team this season, which is why I have him as one of my sleepers. May not even be the best word for some of these players because it's not like they're late round flyers. They're just players that I would draft much earlier than ADP because in Yahoo leagues, his ADP is 79.9, ESPN 111.4, and Fantrax 72.2. I'd take him inside the top 60 and feel really good getting him at ADP, but I would definitely take him ahead of ADP just based off of what we've seen when he's healthy and on the floor and starting for Toronto and playing a huge role. And I think that's going to happen again this season. And this is finally going to be, and I know it's finally makes it sound like we've been waiting like 3 years, but if you're a Quickley fan, then you have been waiting a while for New York to start him. But the breakout that we were kind of promised heading into last season with Immanuel Quickley as the starting point guard in Toronto. The player that we've got to talk about today is Dereck Lively, center for Dallas, who's coming off a season where he only played 36 games and 23.1 minutes per game and averaged 8.7 points, 7.5 rebounds, 2.4 assists, and 1.6 blocks per game. Finished just outside the top 100 in 9 category leagues. Kind of a, not a very telling stat set there. Because he was sidelined for 2.5 months, starting in mid-January, and only played a couple of games down the stretch of the regular season ahead of the playoffs. But there's a few factors as to why I'm comfortable taking Dereck Lively ahead of ADP, and I will just start by saying that the ADP probably doesn't even matter anymore because just throwing out the numbers, in Yahoo leagues, it's 119.7, ESPN, it's 127.3, and Fantrax, it's 124.3. But he's probably going to go much earlier than that now for a couple of reasons. One being that Daniel Gafford is going to miss the rest of training camp with an ankle injury. Not exactly clear if he will be ready for the start of the regular season. So it could be Dereck Lively obviously getting all the reps during training camp as the starting center, immediately taking on that role to start this upcoming season. And if he plays really well in there or in that role, then he's probably not going to give it back. I can't imagine that they're going to be actively looking to give the job back to Daniel Gafford. The worst case scenario would be that it gets towards a pretty strong minute split. But we've still seen him be productive in a minute split. Like I said, he was at 23.1 minutes per game last season, which is less than half the game, and was still just outside the top 100. The other factor is, and there's a couple like just media day training camp quotes that we probably shouldn't let our decisions be based entirely off of, but the reports that he grew 2 inches, so he's now 7'3", that they're wanting him to shoot threes. It's interesting. I don't think he's going to become a high volume stretch 5 that's basically, 7'3" and shooting threes. He's basically Kristaps Porzingis, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. Don't think that there's going to be that high volume, but enough that he can space the floor a little bit, because I think that opens up a lot for Cooper Flagg, for Anthony Davis, for Kyrie Irving when he gets back, if there's a center that's able to space the floor. So maybe 1 or 2 per game. It's hard to predict exactly, but we'll see. That is an interesting factor, because if he does start shooting more threes, does his field goal percentage go down dramatically? Because that's one of his stronger categories. Hard to say. But I was, even before the Gafford injury, I was comfortable taking Lively just outside the top 100, which is about 20 spots ahead of ADP. depending on what platform you're using. And I think I'd be comfortable taking him inside the top 100 now, if not closer to the 90 range. Just the sense that, say Gafford does miss time early on, or it's a recurring thing, and Lively is just the center this year for more of it, or they bring Gafford along slowly, or Lively just plays so well that it doesn't make sense for them to keep that at 24 and 24 even split, that maybe Lively gets the 28 to 30 minutes and then Gafford just backs him up. There's definitely paths for Lively, who I also just, why that would happen is that he is a better center. He's a better basketball player. So it's not just like, well, yeah, like, well, maybe it'll happen. It's like, no, this guy is a better basketball player and should be playing more minutes than Daniel Gafford, even though they can bring different things to the table. And Gafford's still a valuable player. Lively is younger and better and should be playing more minutes. And having him develop alongside Cooper Flagg and playing alongside Anthony Davis, I think will really help Dereck Lively. So this could end up being, I mean, I expect it to be the best season of his career, but he's got that potential to really take a nice leap forward this year. And we've seen him be a strong passer for a big, a really strong defender for, well, not just for a big, just a really strong defender, strong on the glass. The main issue here for fantasy has been the lack of just a dominant amount of minutes. We'll get there. It'll take time, but I'm definitely comfortable taking Dereck Lively ahead of ADP. The next one we've got is an obvious one that I've been talking about a good bit this summer, and that I'm not alone in talking about throughout this offseason, about how important this player is going to be this upcoming season. That is Andrew Nembhard, who's, it's no secret, he is going to be running the offense this year with Tyrese Halliburton sidelined for the year. I mean, it would be, I don't remember if he's officially been ruled out for the year, if he just said that he's not expecting to play this upcoming season. But Nembhard's going to be the point guard this year. And if you check out our partners at FanDuel, he's currently second in most improved player of the year odds, just behind Amen Thompson. And I think I would feel, and it's plus 1,000, so it's not like heavy favorite, plus 200 or minus anything. So it's still good odds there. And my issue, or my take on most improved player, and I think I gave this rant or a similar one last episode, and looking at the top of the most improved player odds, I may have the opportunity to give it again next episode. Players that have already taken leaps forward, or that it's so expected that they take a leap forward, that, like, I just don't think that if you can predict in the preseason that a player can win most improved player, then did they really improve that much? Or was it just they are taking the expected step in their progression? And I think that for a guy like Amen Thompson, a couple of the other guys at the top, like Modest Buzelis entering year two, like I don't think year two players should ever win most improved player, because they're supposed to take a step forward in their second season. Denny Abdia, I thought, had a breakout second half of the year. That's the same thing with Amen Thompson, which is, I'm like, they kind of already broke out. It would take another pretty large step forward for me to consider them. But some of these players, I think the one exception to that rule, because that's kind of been my hard, fast rule, but it's a player like Nembhard, where it's like, okay, the reason we're predicting this is not because he was really good second half of last year, and now we're expecting him to somehow take an even bigger step forward. It's, oh, the situation is just so set up, and it's going to be so different from last year, that this player is going to all of a sudden have a huge opportunity. And that's kind of the case for Nembhard, who's been really good in the past, just as a fill-in when Tyrese Halliburton's out. But now we're talking about taking an offseason and saying, okay, Halliburton's not an option this year. Andrew Nembhard is our point guard. How can we tweak our offense to kind of tailor to his strengths a little bit more? So I think that factor, combined with he's just going to kind of be in a rhythm of being the guy. He played 28.9 minutes per game last season. I think he's going to obviously see that tick up at least a little bit. And that was in an off-ball role. Still averaged 5 assists per game. Like, TJ McConnell will still come in and get the opportunity to be TJ McConnell, but that shouldn't keep Nembhard from seeing at least 30 to 32 minutes per game. So I'm expecting career highs across the board from him. And expecting to have him to have, which this isn't like a huge thing, like the best fantasy season of his career, but his best finish was last year at 175 per basketball monster in 9-cat leagues. It's not great. And I get why there's hesitation with drafting him, and his ADP really varies by site. So on Yahoo, it's 76.1, ESPN it's 110.7, and Fantrax kind of lands right in the middle at 94.7. So based on that kind of the average between those three, it's pretty much in line with the Fantrax ADP, and I'd be comfortable taking him in the 70s. So on Yahoo leagues, I'm not saying I'm taking him way above ADP, but in ESPN and Fantrax, I'm pretty comfortable taking him well ahead of ADP. I think that even if they change their offensive system to tailor to him a little bit more, it's still a high-paced offense. Nembhard, his career high for assists was last year at 5 per game. I think he can get to like 7. He was over a steal per game last year. Could that go up just by seeing his minutes go up? I expect the points and the threes to go up because he was at 10 and 0.8 last year. I think it'll be interesting to see how he looks, and I'm very curious about it, but I genuinely think he's a really good player, and that this isn't going to be he gets the opportunity, but he's not able to really capitalize on it because he just wasn't good enough. Like, I just don't think that's the case. So it probably is a little bit on the riskier side to be taking him in the top 75, but I think that he has upside to be even better than that. But obviously, if you can get him at ADP, you're maximizing the upside or how much value you can gain back by taking him there, because I think he does have a ton of upside and could have a really, really strong, successful season as the starting point guard for the Pacers. Next up, we've got Brandon Miller for the Hornets, the 2023 number 2 overall pick. Only played 27 games last year, averaged 21 points, 4.9 rebounds, 3.6 assists, 1.1 steals, 3.9 threes per game. Field goal percentage was way down from his rookie year, but it was a small sample size, and he had quite a few really poor shooting performances. But he also had some really, really big ones, especially from beyond the arc. That's why he was averaging 3.9 threes per game last year. And just wanted to add this thing, because I forgot to mention this earlier. But I did mention in the last episode, and I need to continue to remember to, is that I'm getting the ADP data courtesy of #basketball. They have it laid out really nicely. We're able to compare ADPs between Yahoo, ESPN, and Fantrax. And I took that because they also have like the average between the three, compared it to my initial 9-cat rankings, just to kind of get a range of players that I was much higher on than consensus. And I think this is another one of those issues where ESPN ADP is really skewing this, because Yahoo ADP for Miller is 55.8, Fantrax is 56.3, so pretty much just in line with each other. And then ESPN is 102.7 for some reason. Don't know how Brandon Miller is slipping outside the top 100 in that many ESPN leagues, but like, okay, cool. I would definitely take him pretty close, maybe a little bit ahead of Yahoo and Fantrax ADP. So this probably isn't the strongest sleeper, but I would definitely be happy to take him a little bit ahead of ADP. Obviously, the big question mark in Charlotte always is and will continue to be, can everyone be healthy? Can anyone be healthy? I think this is a talented enough team to compete for a play-in spot in the East. Heck, the last couple times that this team wasn't totally decimated by injuries, they were a play-in team in the East. And I think now that they have, if LaMelo is healthy, obviously Brandon Miller wasn't healthy for much of last season. Miles Bridges is still there. Added Colin Sexton, drafted Con Knipple. The center room is a little bit questionable, but in this Eastern Conference, I think they have enough to at least compete for a postseason spot. And I think Brandon Miller taking a big step forward is going to be a part of that. I think he's going to be a primary scoring option for them and a really, really strong source of three-pointers, which is what we saw for a limited sample size last season. Despite shooting 40.3, not 43, 40.3% from the floor last season, he was 75th in per game value, according to Basketball Monster. So him just getting up to an average, even a below average field goal percentage, automatically vaults him into being a top 50 play. Pretty well rounded in every other category. Doesn't really hurt you anywhere except for the field goal percentage, and the turnovers weren't great, but I expect better, easier looks and fewer turnovers if LaMelo Ball is healthy. Now, obviously, that is the biggest question mark, and will continue to be a massive question mark. I'm not here to tell you that I am or have any reason to believe that LaMelo Ball is guaranteed to be healthy this season. I just hope so. Hopefully he stays healthy. But if that happens, even if it doesn't happen, I expect Brandon Miller to be a top 50 player. So I think he's definitely worthy of being taken closer to his Yahoo and Fantrax ADP, and I would definitely take him a little bit earlier than that as well. Next up is Jordan Poole, who will be the point guard for the Pelicans to start this season, and I assume for much of this season. Just kind of depends on DeJounte Murray's return to play, how healthy he can be by January, and how competitive this team is. I think even without the rights to their own first-round pick, it would be kind of silly to rush DeJounte back if they're way out of the play-in or playoff picture by January or February. It's like kind of a balance of, hey, we want this team to be good the next year. Don't really want to risk re-injury or something else happening to DeJounte Murray. So bringing him along at a appropriate timeline, I think, is a fair way to put that, which is probably the only question mark as to how good Jordan Poole can be this year. Because I think, and if you've been listening to this show for more of the Dynasty content, you've probably heard this a number of times from Matt Lawson, which I have also echoed because it's really good. It's a really good way to look at it, is that the Pelicans don't have their first round pick this year. There's no incentive for them to lose basketball games even in April. Now, could we, the last few games of the regular season? Sure. Who cares? If they're not in the playoff race, that means Jordan Poole could be playing for most of the season. Heck, with Washington last year, he played up until the last 3 games. His minutes were a little bit limited, and potentially we could see something like that, but the Wizards were more incentivized to lose. They had a first-round pick that turned into Trey Johnson. The Pelicans got basically their first-round pick for this upcoming draft. They used to get Dereck Queen. So sure, they could emphasize playing Dereck Queen and Jeremiah Fears a good bit down the stretch of this season, but Jordan Poole, I think, is still going to be an important part of that, but especially early on. Last season with Washington, he played 29.4 minutes per game and averaged 20.5 points, 30 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 1.3 steals, and 3.5 threes per game. Jordan Poole is in line to have the ball in his hands a ton and be able to get up a lot of threes. We could see a career high in assists, but I'm not banking on that, just of the sense that he should play a career high in minutes. His career high is right around 30. So could we see him get to 32 and get to 5 assists? Maybe. But even if he doesn't, I still think he can continue to get around 20, if not more, points per game. 3.5 threes per game last year. I could see that as something he replicates, just around a steal per game. Basically, the Pelicans are a very interesting team. They've got Jordan Poole, they've got Zion, they've got Herb Jones and Trey Murphy, Yves Missi. Where's this identity here? I see this team as a nice collection of talent that I'm not sure how it all fits together. But I do know one thing, and that's that Jordan Poole is going to have the ball in his hands a lot. And I think he was good last year in the sense that he took steps forward. He was really productive. And I think that we could see him kind of use that, improvement and see him really thrive with this Pelicans roster as both a facilitator and as a scorer. So hopefully, I think my main thing is I hope that Trey Murphy still gets his touches and his opportunities, and that, I mean, seeing a healthy Zion season would be cool. But I think the bottom line here is Jordan Poole is going to have the ball in his hands a ton. His Yahoo ADP is 73.1, ESPN is 70.9, and Fantrax is 67.8. I'm comfortable taking him around the top 50 or even inside the top 50 because I think there's a lot of factors here that will benefit or like play to him being better than some of the other players in this range, such as the fact that I expect him to play for most of the season. There are at least a handful of players in this range that I'm not quite as confident in that happening. And he's coming off a really productive season, and New Orleans is going to need some of his shot creating and playmaking in order to compete because, again, there is no incentive for them to lose. So trying to figure this thing out with Jordan Poole, I think, is going to end up being something that they kind of do for the entire season. I don't think that they're going to abandon this and be like, well, we have a bad record in December. I guess there's no reason for us to play Jordan Poole anymore. It's like, no, might as well try. There's no pick incentivizing this. So I expect Jordan Poole to play a lot, have the ball in his hands a ton, and be really productive, which is why I'd take him about 20 spots higher, maybe a little less than ADP. The last player that we are going to be talking about today is the Jazz center, Walker Kessler, who last season averaged 11.1 points, 12.2 rebounds, 1.7 assists, 2.4 blocks, and shot, of course, an absurd 66.2% from the floor, but it's not that absurd for him because he's kind of just been doing that. This is another case of different sites having very different ADPs. So Yahoo's ADP is of 54.9 is probably pretty much in line with where I'd take him. Maybe even that could even be considered a little bit ambitious. I don't know that I would take him there. I think it would just kind of depend on my team, but in that range, I'm comfortable with. ESPN 72.5, definitely taking him ahead of ADP, and Fantrax 105.2, certainly taking him ahead of ADP there. I understand the concern with what Utah has been doing down the stretch of the last couple of seasons, where it just seems like, hey, they don't want to win basketball games, but they've given us the indication that that's no longer going to be the case. And then they traded away a lot of veteran players. So it seems like this is going to be a more natural, ethical tank, if you will. No, we're not going to try and lose games, but we're going to make sure our roster is filled with young guys. That way, if we do win games, it's our young guys doing it with kind of the idea that, hey, these guys are going to have a lot of struggles to work through. We're probably going to lose games and have a chance at getting one of the top 3 in the 2026 draft class. I assume that's the idea, but that means that we probably aren't going to see Walker Kessler benched until mid to late March, towards the end of the fantasy playoffs. I think we're going to get a lot of really, really good production from him ahead of that. I don't think that the emergence of Kyle Filipowski this summer is going to truly, truly threaten Walker Kessler's minutes to the point where he's back down to 24 per game, because I do still think that he is the best center and certainly the best defensive big man, maybe the best defensive player, depending on what type of defense you value more. Say Taylor Hendricks is the best perimeter defender. Walker Kessler is the best interior defender. So I think that he's going to still play a lot. I'm not too worried about Filipowski there. Them not giving him a contract extension, I think, just is going to make him play harder / better. I'm not buying into, oh, it's a contract year or anything like that, but I think he does have a little bit more to prove now. So, and I think that the team would be happy to play him enough minutes to prove that, if he is going to prove that he is worthy of a massive contract. So in Yahoo leagues, it's pretty much in line with where I'd take him. ESPN and Fantrax, I think it's really good value to be able to get him at ADP, and I would certainly, definitely, that's really good. Take him ahead of ADP. But that is the 6 players that are 6 sleepers for this episode. We have 6 more to talk about which we will get to next week, and hopefully get some more redraft content, get some more dynasty content with the regular season starting in 2.5 weeks. We've got preseason basketball on. That's cool. So there's going to be a lot to talk about this season. Really excited to get into it, but that's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast, which is part of the Old Man Squad Sports Network, part of the Believe Network, and presented by FanDuel. That's going to do it, and I will see you guys next week.